want to talk about the Queensland Government last night moving to dump the principle of detention as a last resort when it comes to young offenders. Big news on a number of fronts. Is this a concession that your government is losing control of Queensland's youth crime problem?
This is a decision to rewrite that part of the Act to make it really clear to the public and to the courts that they need to detain offenders where that is necessary to keep the community safe. That's what Queenslanders have told me they expect and they want to see. They've said that the existing wording was undermining their confidence in the law and in the courts, and so we are rewriting it to make it very clear that community safety must be the first consideration. We need intervention and prevention where that will work, but where it is necessary to detain an offender to keep the community safe, we're going to write into the law that that must be done.
It's a big backflip by the government, a big personal backflip from you as well, Steven Miles. You had previously labelled calls to remove the principle of detention as a last resort as quote-unquote incredibly dangerous, and in your view, you've said in the past, it would harden children and make them more likely to reoffend. That is quite the turnaround.
Well, those comments were in response to mandatory detention and mandatory minimum sentencing. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is clarifying in the law that the courts must take public safety into account as the first consideration when determining whether to detain a young person. This is the result of the community safety plan that I released this week, which I've put together over these last 5 months while travelling Queensland and hearing from Queenslanders about what they want to see.
But won't we see here mandatory, some form of de facto mandatory youth detention, because more likely than not you'll see more young people locked up?
No, the result of this will be that young people will be detained where they are a risk to community safety. We have incredible investments into successful programs that are intervening early and preventing crimes before they occur. But the community rightly expects that if a young person is a risk to community safety, that they will be detained and that we will deliver to them the kinds of rehabilitation programs that can only be intensively delivered in detention. That's what this change is all about.
It's a big issue, law and order, in the forthcoming Queensland election this year, and it's not going well so far for the government. We saw those scenes yesterday of you being confronted by some family members of victims of crime, angry with the government's approach, angry with your approach. Again, I'll ask that question. Do you fear the Labor government has lost control of what is clearly a very serious problem for a lot of Queenslanders?
Well, I think confronted is a stretch, Michael. I went to that rally and chose to meet with those victims and to hear from them what their experiences were and what we could do better. I am absolutely committed to listening to all Queenslanders, including victims of crime, making sure the government is delivering plans and laws that respond to what they want to see.
Well, Russell Field, and I use the word confronted advisedly, and we might have the pictures to bring up, he lost his son Matthew Field, killed by a teenage driver driving a stolen car, was upset you didn't recognise him.
Well, I hadn't met Russell before, but I certainly knew that story, and I was pleased to spend some time with him yesterday to hear about his experience of the justice system, his experience of the victim support system, so that we can do better. Queensland's a big state. I don't know every single Queenslander by name and by face, but I certainly knew Russell's story.
Affected by crime.
And of course I knew that story. It was an awful story. I didn't recognise Russell when I saw him, but I certainly knew the story, and I really appreciated the chance to go to that rally and to speak with the Voice for Victims as well as their members, to hear from them what we can and should do better.